The oldest school of thought always was to say, well, religion came because human beings have always been afraid of what they didn't know. And so what they didn't know, they worshipped. If the thunder and lightning scared them, then they made thunder and lightning a god, so that it wouldn't hurt them. If a fire burned them, then they found a god to look after the fire. And so the more primitive the human being, the more primitive his religion. That was what people usually said. Go back far enough and you find people worshiping everything imaginable, and as we come down through history, the religion gets more and more sensible and intellectual and so on. But there have been those who have insisted that that's not what the facts seem to indicate. That actually, if you look very carefully at the history of human beings, it seems that the farther back you go, the more intelligent the religion, and that as we come down through the ages, the more degenerate the religion gets. And the people who support that idea will bring all kinds of facts into consideration. One of the things that they point out is that when we examine any group of people, we tend to confuse three different things as all being part of the same thing. We look at their science and their magic and their religion, and we think it's all religion, when those are really three different kinds of things. Magic is different from religion because of a very opposite viewpoint. Magic is when you think that you have some influence over the invisible powers. Religion works the other way around. It's supposed to be whatever invisible powers there are influence you. And science, of course, is an explanation of the shape of the world. How does it work? And as it happens, you may find groups of people who have some very strange ideas about how the world is made. And so when people look at them, they say, how primitive. Look how primitive their religion is. But that's not their religion. As an example, I'd suggest if you ever get the chance to investigate it, it's been documented now. You have a tribe in Papua, the Kapauku, which were only discovered by the outside world in the 1920s. Before that time, this tribe was isolated. They had never met the outside world, and nobody knew of them. The Kapauku tribe lived in the island, and they thought that was the whole world. Now, if you ask the Kapauku, what's the world made of? How does it work? He may start off by telling you, well, the sky that you see overhead is a big bowl turned upside down, and it's got holes in it. And when the sun goes down, some of the light from the sun shines back through the holes, and that's what makes those lights that look like stars. That sounds very primitive, and so people would be tempted to think, well, the Kapauku is primitive. Well, maybe his science is primitive, but is his religion a foolish item? There was a little book written just a few years ago called The Kapauku of Papua, and it documents in under 100 pages what the Kapauku believe about a lot of things. And here and there it talks about religion. And in every case it points out something possibly surprising to a lot of people. It mentions that as soon as the Kapauku were discovered, well, the missionaries came running to save their souls, of course. And it mentions here and there how the Kapauku used to argue with the missionaries and used to embarrass the missionaries. And there's the story of one man who was old. He knew he was dying, and he asked his grandsons to help him, one under each arm. He says, take me down, I want to see the priest before I die. I can't die in peace. He went down to see the priest, and he asked him, he said, I can't die peacefully until I know the answer to one question. And this bushman, here's a man with a few leaves wrapped around him. You might think this is a primitive man. He said to the priest, you people have such an advanced civilization? Why is your religion so primitive? It's the bushman asking the priest, why is your religion so primitive? As far as the bushman was concerned, the missionary's religion was very backward, very childish, very foolish, because of a number of considerations. Some of it is reported in that book, the kinds of arguments that they used to have. It's reported that one day the missionary was reading to them a passage from the book of Daniel, and the tribe started to laugh, and so he said, "What's so funny?" And they said, "Read that again. What did you say God was?" And so he read the passage where it says, "God is the Ancient of Days." And the tribe laughed. They thought that was quite a joke. The priest still didn't see the joke. He said, "What's so funny?" They said, "Did you say God is old?" The priest said, "Yes, very old." And they laughed. They said, "You mean he used to be young?" You see how the so-called primitive man is way ahead of this individual, that young and old are things that don't have anything to do with God. Whatever you mean when you say God, it's not something that grows old. And it was never young either. This kind of thing is in agreement with what the Quran says about the history of religion. It tells us that in every nation, every people had a messenger sent to them to tell them what they needed to know. Which means that the truth has been spread around to everybody. It may have got lost or it may have been corrupted, but it's been given to everybody. That's the Muslim viewpoint. The Muslim is also told in the Quran that there are no new ideas in religion. That is, if you meet somebody that belongs to some established religion, if he tells you something about how his religion works, well, somebody long before him used to say the same thing. You'll still find some people who will tell you, as they come from the church, they'll tell you how their whole system is supposed to work. The Quran mentions that. It says when they say, for example, when they say God has a son, they're imitating what people used to say long before them. They imitate the people of old. See, as an example, if I said to you, maybe it's familiar enough to most of you, I'm sure it is to some of you, if I said to you, what great religious figure was the Son of God, born in a stable or a cave at the end of December, who then grew up and he worked miracles, and then he died for the sins of men, but 3 days later he was raised up. Who is that? Well, as a matter of fact, it could be any of several dozen individuals. Osiris of the Egyptians, Adonis, Bacchus of the Greeks, and Baal of the Babylonians, Mithras of the Persians, they all fit that description. They were all sons of God, worshipped by their devotees,